I don't know what to say. For once, without the Russo brothers, Marvel have made something that does not have stupid, untimely humor that ruins it. There was genuine emotion in this episode, and it was treating a subject matter with a lot of maturity and respect, and it told a story seriously. This is what I have been asking for all this time from the MCU, and as a result, that made this episode more investing and more emotional. Even when Wanda saw Vision's dismantled body and touched his head and said,
I can't feel you.
"This is really freaking emotional. Where the hell was this before?" This is the kind of stuff I know that Marvel is capable of, and usually they would interrupt emotional moments like this with a joke, but here they didn't. This is what I want to see more of, consistency with tone, and I don't want them to just interrupt scenes like this from playing out. This scene also shows us that this guy was lying. Wanda didn't break in and take Vision's body. She left and created her own Vision, so I wonder why he lied and what else he is plotting and why he really wants to kill Wanda to the point that he is lying to people that Wanda broke in and attacked everyone. We will have to wait and find out. And this episode does explain why Wanda is so much into sitcoms with this world that she created, and it was about what I expected. And after seeing the reason why we are in the sitcom world, this is where a well-written show will make you want to go back and watch the show again and see it with a more educated set of eyes. But unlike movies that do this well, I have no desire to do that with WandaVision because they dragged the episodes out for too long. Now, the only problems I have with this episode is that A, I still don't care about the kids, and B, watching those previous 7 episodes feels like a complete waste of time, because emotionally, they didn't make me any more sad or add any extra investment to this episode. They might as well have given us a flashback of the scene in Infinity War where Wanda sees Vision die, the part where she talks to Hawkeye at Stark's funeral in Endgame, and then cut straight to this episode, and you'll best understand what she's going through, and you'll truly see her journey continue from Endgame. As is, the direction they went by just throwing us into the sitcom stuff for 7 episodes ultimately didn't do anything to make you feel more sorry for Wanda in this moment. And that is a big problem for this show as a whole, as it feels like we got a bunch of build-up, but it didn't make the payoff any better. So the build-up just feels like a failed experiment. And that's exactly what this whole comedy sitcom mystery they threw us in was, an experiment. And I think they could have done it much better. And the thing is, the sitcoms that overstay their welcome, you don't even need them to understand the emotional state that Wanda is in when she sees Vision's dead body. When I saw this scene, I had all the emotions that the scene wanted me to have, and none of that was amplified because of the previous sitcom episodes we saw the two in. The sitcoms really lacked any emotional purpose because they are supposed to make a scene like this even more sad and emotional, but they just didn't. They had absolutely no effect on these fantastic emotional scenes. My brother even said that he thought the show would be more effective if it started out with this episode, and although I don't fully agree, I do see where he is coming from. It would have done less meandering and it would have started the show off with a very strong emotional hook. But yeah, I really am at a loss for words. Everything in this episode was great, and this was the least comedic episode, and honestly, it greatly benefited from it. All of the other WandaVision episodes have been good, bad, and okay, but none of them have been truly great. But this is the first episode that is fantastic. The only thing that I can say, which is kind of negative, but not really, is that this episode is doing nothing new. All TV shows have done this. The episode where the hero is going through their previous memories, and the villain shows up and comments on their lives every now and then. Smallville did several versions of this, the best one being when Clark has to go inside of Lex's mind where he confronts a strong, evil Lex Luthor, and the remaining super weak, good Lex Luthor. And symbolically, evil Lex Luthor is killing what little is left of good Lex Luthor. That was an amazing episode, and honestly, one of my favorites as to when we go inside of a character's head and revisit segments of their past. The Flash also did this. Arrow did it as well at some point, and I have seen plenty of other shows that have done this as well. This is something that TV shows always do, and WandaVision has taken a spin at it, and it was a lot of fun to watch. I don't really have much else to say. This was a beautiful episode, and the best episode of the entire season by far. We should have gotten it much sooner, and I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. This episode just proves it to me that Marvel really need to pack it in with the forced goofy humor, use it where it's needed, and then leave it. Don't overdo it. And we got a credit scene that was not crap like it was in the last episode. And immediately, I got 2 things out of it. One is that Vision is brought back to life for a short period, and 2, which is most likely, is that he is a lifeless shell that Sword is going to use to fight Wanda. And Wanda, knowing that this is Vision's body, will be very reluctant to fight him. And now we move on to episode 9. Oh boy, are we gonna be here for a while. Just when the last episode blew me away, I thought that the show was being put on the right track. And well, as you can tell by the tone of my voice, Now I'll just say that there was some good things in this episode. First off, the best fight of the episode was Vision versus Vision. They did some cool stuff where the two were both simultaneously using their powers, and I like how they both talk to each other intelligently and choose that the best course of action is to stop fighting. And in the end, fake Vision gives Vision his memory back and he flies away, so the real Vision is still alive in the end, because like I said, the MCU keep bringing their characters back to life, and they can't keep them dead. Death means nothing in the MCU. And the fight at the end, although I enjoyed the Vision fight, it just felt like a lame and predictable comic book movie ending. The ending is very much the same as what we got in Dark Phoenix, and not only did it remind me of Dark Phoenix, but it also reminded me of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman.
It is that evolution always wins.
My programming directive is to destroy Vision. My speed resolved this peacefully.
Did you guys notice that, or was it just me? And the so-called big battle with Wanda and Agatha in the end, I think even calling it a battle is giving it far more credit than it deserves, because there really was no battle. Wanda uses her powers and Agatha absorbs them, and for some reason Agatha stops fighting and keeps monologuing and trying to convince Wanda to give up her powers. And this just confused me. Why are you convincing her to give you her powers when all you have to do is attack Wanda like you have been doing, have her defend herself, and then just absorb the rest of her powers? But just completely stopping the fight to convince her to give you her powers, it was just so stupid. Really it was. And it honestly made their battle come off as very silly, and I couldn't take it seriously. I mean, The Incredibles made fun of the monologuing villain, and this show actually does what that movie was making fun of and expects you to take it seriously.
So why don't you surrender your magic? What do you say?
And now I have a weapon that only I can defeat. And when I unleash it, I'll get... You sly dog! You got me monologuing! I can't believe it.
It also did the superhero landing that Deadpool made fun of, where Wanda, despite being nearly choked to death, dropped to her feet like a superhero supermodel. I mean really, I have never seen the superhero landing look that clean and polished before. And when she finally takes out the big villain of the show, it happened way too quickly, and seeing her get defeated didn't feel satisfying in the slightest. I mean, these are two witches. Remember what Wanda did in Infinity War and Endgame, how fast and unforgiving her fighting style was and how she would pick up huge objects. In comparison, this is just embarrassingly uncreative and uninspired. And it's not helped by the fact that Agatha absorbing Wanda's powers reminds me of the exact same scene in Dark Phoenix where the alien is absorbing Jean's powers. And it also reminds me of the scene in the 2003 Hulk movie where in that confusing final battle, Banner's father is absorbing the Hulk's powers. They took the end scene of two bad comic book movies and used that as the finale between Wanda and the villain in her own show. And it worked a tiny bit better than those two, but barely. It was just unimpressive and one of the worst final battles in the MCU, and it was by far the worst parts of this episode, and it should have been one of the best. Also, Wanda uses this ability of hers, and it was a good move, but it pissed me off that she used it because it begs the question, why didn't she use it on Thanos in Infinity War? And how did this nightmare turn on Wanda? And when it does, all of a sudden, she's weak and lets the dead people take her. She should have at least attempted to use her powers and fight them off, but she doesn't. Until much later, that is, when it becomes more dramatic to do so. And what's with the two poorly done Incredibles shots? This shot looks so silly, and I asked my brothers what they thought of this image as it was the final episode's thumbnail on Disney+, and the first word that came out of their mouths was also the word silly. And yeah, it was silly. It wasn't epic and awesome looking like how The Incredibles executed it. And then when Wanda uses a force field to protect her family, again, it looked like a less impressive version of another incredible shot with the family. And on a side note, who else thought that her son looked like he was dressed up as Ben 10? Also, this final episode still shows us that it wasn't Agatha all along. It was still Wanda. Agatha even tells Wanda that it was all her own doing.
What are you doing to her? You're making her say this.
She's your meat puppet. I just cut her strings.
Making this exaggerated reveal make even less sense. I think that Agatha is such a bullshit villain. All the credit for this character goes to the actress doing a really great and entertaining job at giving this character some personality, but the way the villain just plays pranks and is somehow credited as the main villain who was behind this all along just doesn't come across and makes no sense, and she gets taken out so quickly. I gotta say, she really is one of the most non-threatening MCU villains, and this whole episode plays out and ends in a way where the other characters such as Wu, Darcy, and Monica Rambeau all feel completely useless and irrelevant to what goes on in the rest of the episode. Even when Agent Jackass here gets arrested, it also feels underwhelming, and you didn't need Darcy to stop him. The kids easily could have done it with their own powers. Wu also talks to Clint over the phone, presumably Hawkeye, and he doesn't show up in the episode, but we'll most likely see him answer the phone on his end in his own Hawkeye show. And how can no one here see Wu grabbing the phone? That's just incompetent direction. I mean, this guy is right behind him. And Monica Rambeau, I never really liked her on this show. She started out fine, but as the show went on, I really started to lose interest in her. And I think I know why. Her performance comes off like she is on a show from the CW. Everyone else is acting like they are in a movie, and she just comes off as one of the side characters that you would get in a CW DC TV show. Not when they were good, but the bad ones. And that's why I'm not that impressed with this character. She seems too far removed from what everyone else is doing, and acting wise, she feels like she is very much one note, especially in the final scenes of episode 7. What also annoyed me is that Wanda didn't have to face any consequences for her downright villainous actions. Throughout this show, we are told that these people are in agony, and in this episode, we also have this lady who begs Wanda to let her daughter out of her room.
I have a daughter. She's 8. If you could just let her out of her room. If I could just hold her.
And in the end, after they're all free from their prison, they all give Wanda dirty looks. And then Monica Rambeau said something that really pissed me off.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
What?
You stupid bitch.
Even if they did know, who gives a shit? She kept them hostage and was not letting them go, and the state they were in is described as a fate worse than death. And you're saying that these people have no idea what she sacrificed for them? The absolute nerve! She might as well go up to Thanos after he killed Gamora and snapped his fingers in Infinity War and say to him,
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
I just found this to be a stupid line, and it made me dislike Monica Rambeau's character even more than I already did. And Wanda, as I said, didn't even face any ramifications for the crimes that she committed. It's just a convenient ending that you would expect from an MCU film, all wrapped up neatly with a bow. Also, in my review for the last episode, I said that Agent Douche here was lying about Wanda breaking in and stealing Vision, and aside from being a generic douchebag agent, what was the reason for him lying to everyone? They made it out like he had a secret prejudice against Wanda or something, and that's why he lied, but in the end, that lie doesn't come back, it's just completely ignored, so he lied for no reason. This was a completely pointless cover-up. He could just as easily have told everyone that Wanda has kept people hostage in this little bubble of hers and that we need to take her out to free everyone. That excuse to kill her would have passed. What was the point of framing it like she broke in and tried to steal Vision? This part of the show really made no sense, and because this show did a horrible job at making him villainous, they just go for the lazy route and just make him cartoonishly evil to the point that he would even shoot a couple of kids. And they do this just so you can hate him and think that he's worse than Wanda. That is so lazy, even for the MCU. And yeah, that resolution with Evan Peters, let's talk about that. Now, Kevin Feige said that WandaVision is the first of a 3-part multiverse story, and with a live-action Spider-Verse movie being made with Spider-Man 3, it was more than fair for us to assume that Kevin Feige was bringing in some of the X-Men with the multiverse in WandaVision. Especially with the casting of Evan Peters as Quicksilver, he could potentially have been pulled into this world via the multiverse. There are just so much huge possibilities with this ingenious reveal, but in the end, he was just a nobody. It turns out that he was just some random guy, which makes the casting of Evan Peters even more misleading and honestly trollish, because they knew that we were gonna think that this was their way of bringing in the X-Men via the multiverse, and it turned out to all be bullshit in the end. I mean, why would you tease something so huge and awesome and then just subvert our expectation with a boner joke? Are we supposed to be impressed by that? It's another example of the MCU doing something that starts out cool and then just turns it into a joke. and I question why they even bothered to cast Evan Peters in the first place, with the exception of just tricking people into watching and talking about the show. Speaking of tricking people into watching the show, Kevin Feige said that we need to see WandaVision in order to understand the 3-part story of Spider-Man 3 and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, as all 3 films are supposed to be connected. But then 1 week before the finale, when we had 1 episode to go before the show concluded, he suddenly said, well, you don't need to see WandaVision in order to understand Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. We're making it so that if you haven't seen WandaVision, you will still understand what's going on. So Kevin Feige essentially tricked us into watching the show, and then after we had all seen the previous 8 and we had 1 episode left, he told us the truth that, well, you don't need to see the show to understand the future movies, which is very frustrating. Just like when Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was announced as a full-on horror movie, and then he said that it's just going to be a normal Marvel movie with a couple of horror scenes in it. And if they are anything like the so-called horror scenes in WandaVision, then they really aren't going to be anything noteworthy, even with Sam Raimi at the helm, as they can easily tell him to not make the scenes that scary. And by the way, again, the Clone Wars animated show had horror and suspense in several of their episodes, and they were far more frightening, scary, and disturbing than anything in WandaVision. Again, it's another example of the MCU being too family-friendly to the point that a family-friendly animated series on Cartoon Network is actually outdoing them with regards to mature storytelling. And the Clone Wars tells funnier jokes. We were also told that the show would have a Mandalorian Season 2 level cameo by the end, but that never happened. Again, another lie. The false marketing really is another thing that hurt this show. If you don't have anything, then don't lie and insinuate that you do. But I feel this show is more style and hype over substance. And then we are given 2 end credit scenes that I don't give 2 shits about after being so disappointed by this main story. I genuinely do feel that if Marvel don't have the Russo brothers, then they don't know what to do with building up their grand story. The Winter Soldier, Civil War, and Infinity War, these are movies that were so great on their own merits, and they built up to the grand story, Endgame. But WandaVision has not made a show that is great on its own merits, and all it essentially did was lightly hint towards future movies in the end. Emotionally, the show also peaked with this scene in episode 8, and nothing else was going to be as good as that, because that was the real Vision. This, although is a likable fake Vision, is still a fake Vision, an imaginary friend, and this scene was not going to have an emotional impact anywhere near as good as the scene in episode 8. So yeah, this was a passable episode, but as the finale to this show, it was underwhelming and disappointing as all heck, and it gets an unenthusiastic 6 out of 10. And the show as a whole gets an average 5 out of 10. This show would have been much better as a binge watch, because waiting for each episode to come out just felt like it was delivering disappointment after disappointment. And after having watched the whole season now, I can say that it didn't need to be 9 episodes long. It could have cut the fat and told its entire story in 3 hours. This whole show honestly feels like a troll, and I don't think the writing was smart enough to fully realize the potential of this concept. And I'm just gonna say it, I think the show is overrated as heck. The show needs to be good on its own merits, and I feel like most of the value of this show comes from what it is setting up next, and that makes this show just one big advertising campaign, rather than something that stands on its own. And when I finished watching the final episode, I was like, oh, the show is over. Okay, I guess. I didn't feel like, wow, that was so awesome. Shows that have given me that wow factor was the finale to The Flash's season 1 and 2, but especially season 1, the season finales to Sherlock series 2 and 3, as well as the series finale to Avatar The Last Airbender season 2 and 3, and several of the Clone Wars seasons, especially that series finale. Those shows left me with a wow factor, but WandaVision left me with nothing really, and that's because it feels like they spent more time meandering with the comedy sitcom stuff and only spent 2 episodes giving us the actual story, and whereas episode 8 did a terrific job, episode 9 was just a lackluster conclusion to a lackluster show. A show that was acting like it had so much cool stuff up its sleeve, but in the end, it gave us a boner joke to one of the biggest questions in the season finale.
Boner.
And that honestly feels like an insult. Now who else wants to see the MCU bring in Hugh Jackman as Wolverine? So, we've reached the end of the WandaVision reviews. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you want me to make these types of reviews for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series when that comes out, then give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below. And with the Snyder Cut releasing tomorrow, I will watch it and get straight to making the Versus video where I compare it to the 2017 Joss Whedon version of Justice League. And I will compare the differences with the story, the heroes and villains, the action changes between the 2 versions, and many other comparisons including the villains such as Steppenwolf. And if you want to hear my early spoiler-free thoughts on the movie, then I will give patrons an early spoiler-free audio review of the Snyder Cut, as I have not been keeping on top of Patreon content lately. So hopefully this will make up for that, as I did not intend to give an early Patreon review initially. And if anyone else does want to listen to the early review, then all you have to do is donate just $1, and then you'll gain access to all of my podcasts. So thanks again as always for watching, guys, and I will see all of you very soon. Take care.